So I was asked to, I guess, speak about the brahmachari life when I joined. And at least that's one topic I was asked to speak on. And I only know from the Los Angeles because that's the only temple I was actually brahmachari at, and that was, well, it was the world headquarters, but it was. I mean, for a little while, I was in Detroit as brahmachari, and I'd gone up to San Francisco for festivals. But as far as living in, that was just in Los Angeles. So that was a kind of unique. At the time when I joined, there were of course, in the early days, we just bought or got churches or houses. We weren't building our own temples, so we didn't have design our own facilities. And Los Angeles was a church, and it had schools, built schoolroom, classrooms when we bought it. So those were empty rooms. I'd say about each room was maybe a third of this size of hall, and in two of those rooms, there was between 60 to 80 brahmacharis, and we stayed in those two rooms. Well, when it got larger, then there was a third room. There was actually 4 of those rooms upstairs. So when it got larger, we were using the one room to take prasadam in. So when it got larger, we started devotees sleeping in there as well. So what we used those rooms for was just basically sleeping. And when we joined, we were issued if we didn't have a sleeping bag, they were given some blankets or sleeping bag. We just slept on the floor. There were no cots. So we were issued 2 dhotis, 2 kurtas, 2 the chadars, 2, and then 2 kopan. And that was our, and let's see, and 1 bowl for taking milk and a spoon. And actually, when I joined, I was issued a small bottle of mustard oil, because Prabhupada always used the mustard oil massage. So they were issuing it to the brahmacharis, and and we had a locker. So we would keep our clothes and things in the locker. And what was I going to say? And most of it, well, unless we were doing something that we required regular pants and shirt, most of us, when we came, we just gave those clothes up. So that's all we had is the dhoti and the kurta and all. And there was like 2 washroom, one for the toilets and then the washroom, and it was just a couple of showers in one room, 1 or 2 sinks, and so that was for all of us. And what the program was is cold shower in the morning. So they would turn off the hot water heater at night, so that we made sure it was cold water in the morning, and then we take a hot shower in the evening. So Prabhupada's, what we were told was Prabhupada's system is just rinse off in the morning, and no soap or anything, just cold rinse off, and then in the evening you use the soap and wash up. So that was our program. As sometimes many devotees taught that Prabhupada, we had to learn everything. We had, we would. I don't know if I guess I'll get into it, but squatting on the toilet. We didn't, Prabhupada would squat, so we learned to squat on the toilet. That's instead of sitting down. So most of the people who joined, because this is I joined in the 70s and in America, and most people came, they were long haired. You could call hippies. We didn't even call hippies. In Southern California, a hippie was somebody who was not so civilized. So In Southern California, we called ourselves heads. Anyways, kind of. But because we took ourselves as more intellectuals, I guess. But what do you want to say? And our program.
Not able to hear who is the sound.
Our program, all new devotees, didn't matter who they were, because that was his Bhaktisiddhanta's program. It didn't matter who they are; they had to do menial service, to engage, to begin their services. So that meant, scrubbing the floors in the kitchen, cleaning the floors in the temple, cutting the vegetables, and everything was actually quite strict. And the Los Angeles, the kitchen, that was Radharani's kitchen. And I remember one of my godbrothers, he's passed away now, but he used to be in the kitchen a lot, and especially like I remember cooking for the Sunday feast. He would be sitting on like a step stool with this big 20-gallon pot of cooking down the milk into burfi, It's sitting there almost all day long, just stirring them. But if you walked, new bhaktas were not allowed to come in the cooking part of the kitchen. There would the preparation where the cutting the vegetables and the washing the pots, but the cooking kitchen, you had to be second initiation unless you were coming just to scrub the floor. So, and if you come in that kitchen, Prabhu, do you have a new dhoti? Is that clean dhoti? Have you just showered? So the system was you had to be showered, just freshly showered, and a clean dhoti before you could go into the cooking kitchen, Radharani's kitchen. I don't know how the standards are nowadays. But and there was a handwritten note by Srila Prabhupada giving the rules of Radharani's kitchen. First thing was no shoes, and then to be freshly showered in new cloth. And so everyone, when you first joined, you were giving, the menial services. I was scrubbing the pots one day, and this devotee, he was a new devotee, and he was also scrubbing. He said, "Why are they putting me here to scrub pots? I have a PhD." I don't remember who it was. I don't remember. I just remember that. And one day I was scrubbing the pots, and Jaya Tirtha came in, who was at that time our temple president, and he was just saying that. Actually, he said that when he joined, he didn't have to scrub the pots. I don't know why, but anyway, he was just saying how he respecting us for having to do these services. So, but I should tell a story about what I heard it. I heard it the day it took place from Shruti Kirti. I actually asked him about it just a few months ago, and when I started telling him, he didn't catch it at first, and then when I gave him further, and then I remember that. He remembered that. So what it was is Srila Prabhupada was there in LA, and he just came down unannounced and went into the kitchen, and Radharani's kitchen, and it was always kept spotless when Prabhupada was there. So he went in, and there was one pot, just a small pot, that they had done an offering, they had cooked something, and they had transferred it onto the offering plate, but they didn't wash the pot. And he came down with Shruti Kirti, and Prabhupada saw it, and he said, "Why is this pot not washed?" He said, go get Jaya Tirtha, the temple president, and Karunder, the GBC. He said, "Go get them." So he brought them in, and the way Shruti Kirti explained it to me at that day when it took place, he said heads were rolling. Prabhupada was furious, and he was shouting at Jaya Tirtha, "Why isn't this pot washed? Why isn't this pot washed?" And Jayatirtha would get very emotional. A number of times when Prabhupada chastised him, he would just start crying. So Prabhupada was chastising, and Jayatirtha said, that's not my service, Prabhupada. And actually, that happened to Jayatirtha twice. He actually said the same thing. You think he would learn anyway. But Prabhupada said, you are the temple president. You are responsible, And then he also chastised Karandar. You are the GVC. You're also responsible. Karandar is more, he understood. He took the responsibility. But actually, Prabhupada shouted so much, Jayatirtha was crying. And with just one pot. And everything else, Actually, one time the inspectors came, the county inspectors, and the devotees asked him to take off his shoes. And he did. And he walked in with socks on, and it was, everything was kept, because I know I was part of the ones that had to wash the floor. What we would do is we would wash it down, and then we would take a squeegee, and it was just a concrete floor, plain concrete. And we would squeegee it down, and it would be dry. So you could walk barefoot, no problem, socks, no problem. Unfortunately, later on, they they remodeled the kitchen, make it better. And what they did is they put down tile, the terracotta tile, but it had gaps between. And so the squeegee to dry it didn't work. You hit the space in between, and so it wouldn't work. So then the floors were never kept dry. They would mop it down, and they would stay wet, and then devotees started getting cracked heels, and the main cook started getting infection in his heel. He had to go to the doctor, and he said he had to keep it dry. I'm just giving this because I know this reduced the standards, because what happened is the doctor told him he had to keep it dry, and I happened to have been in Jayatirtha's office when he came in and was he came back from the doctor, and he said the doctor told him to bandage, and also he'd have to wear shoes. So he was arguing that because he'd have to wear shoes, he can't do cooking anymore because he can't wear shoes in the kitchen. And Jayatirtha said, you are the main cook. You're our only cook, basically, for all the brahmacharyas, brahmatrinis. I'll get to the brahmatrinis because that's another thing. But so Jayatirtha said, you don't have to wear shoes. So they went out and got, rubber type shoes. The problem was, then devotees started complaining because number one rule, handwritten rule from Prabhupada, was no shoes in the kitchen. And then devotees were complaining, well, he's wearing shoes, I want to wear shoes. And because the floors were always wet. So that upgrading the kitchen actually downgraded the whole standards, by putting the tile in the floor. I tried to, years later, talk to like Rameshwar about it. Because GBC was supposed to keep up the standards that Prabhupada set. And instead, they let the standards go. Especially once they became gurus, they were more interested in that their pictures were properly placed on the altars than, keeping up Prabhupada's standards. That's just a fact. I'm not making that up with the pictures. But so then they got kitchen shoes and they put them out. And that became, that started to lower the standard. And then people would just start coming, they saw with shoes, and people would just walk in the kitchen with shoes. So then the whole thing was gone down. And that kitchen later, in 1984, I remember, because I had gone to Detroit to work on the museum there. When I came back, the whole kitchen was just a mess. Standards had just totally fallen. The floor was actually not even kept clean. It was like gritty, and just the whole standard. In fact, the pujaris complained so much the kitchen was so dirty, they had to build a separate deity kitchen smaller kitchen just for the deity cooking. But before, that kitchen was for everyone. It was for the altar, for the deities, for the devotees. And they'd only created that deity kitchen so they could keep a separate standard. So the devotee kitchen, there was no standard, basically. And cockroaches, it was horrible. I had all the computer equipment in a, and those buildings were built like like I said, it was a church. The original building was 1909. The original wooden, that was the original temple room, but that we started using for temple room, and that's where now the LA Museum is. The Bhagavad Gita Museum is, and that building was built in 1909, and then the sanctuary, which now is the temple in Los Angeles, built around 1940 something, I think 42. And then the other buildings that were the classrooms, were the ashrams, that was built in 1962. Or 63 something. The reason I know that is because when we were doing the museum, we had to get everything certified through the county and city, and they had to know what dates and all these things. So there was a space between where the museum was, that older building, and where they built the other, is like a little hallway. And that's where I put all the control equipment for the museum. So when I came back from Detroit, there were so many live mice, dead mice, cockroaches. It was just a total mess. I mean, the whole standards went down. When these people became gurus, when they're GBC, I mean, you read all the instruction Prabhupada gave. Their main duty was to uphold the standards that Prabhupada set. You know, that was their main duty. But once they became so-called gurus, they were just, they just didn't care about the standards. So I told Rameshwar how bad it was. I opened the door, because the thing was that equipment hallway had a doorway that led into the kitchen. And so to go in, I opened the door, and cockroaches were falling all over the place. I mean, live ones running around. I told Rameshwar, I am not, because I needed to upgrade the equipment with the new equipment we made for Detroit. And I said, I am not going to go in that room, you know, and the standards are so bad. I told him how opened the door, and some cockroaches falling on my head and running all over. He just said, no. He thought I was making it up. And so I dragged him over, and he brought the temple president, Vatsal. And we got to the kitchen, and Rameshwar was taking off his shoes, and Vatsal, the temple president, just walked in with his outdoor shoes on. And Rameshwar said, Vatsal, your shoes. And he told Rameshwar, nobody, everybody wears their outdoor shoes in the kitchen now. So they didn't even know what the standards were. They just let everything go. I mean, that was, I wasn't even thinking I was going to talk on this. I just kind of got into it. Because it was always actually a sore point for me, because how things went so bad. One day I walked in the kitchen, and there was, they made a number of glubjamans and kept them in a large, container, so they'd offer just a few at a time. And one day a devotee walked in, opened up the container, started eating the glubjaman right in the kitchen. It wasn't even offered yet. They were for the deities. I mean, I blew up. I threw the guy out of the kitchen. And the standards just went totally down. In Detroit, the same thing. Actually, when Jayatirtha was in Detroit, I went there in 1981. And so when Jayatirtha was there, he kept the standards up there. And then when he fell down, Bhavananda and Rameshwar became co-GBCs there. So that was in 93. And when Bhavananda came, he was taking a tour. And the kitchen, he just walked in with these outdoor shoes. But before then, all the standards, Jayatirtha had kept the standards up. In fact, no shoe. We had a prasadam hall. This is in Detroit. The Detroit temple was the Fisher Mansion. The Lawrence Fisher was the one who started Cadillac Motors. And then he and his brothers created Body by Fisher, and they made the bodies, the car bodies, for General Motors for all their different cars for many years. So all General Motors cars, Buick, Pontiac, Chevrolet, and all those would have a sticker, Body by Fisher, on the car, on the inside doorway. So that they started that company, and he was quite wealthy. So when we bought that temple, we bought that house. That was his house. It was a mansion, and it was built in the 1928 at $2 million. Well, $2 million in 1928 would be like about 200 or more million today. I mean, it was, and it's a very opulent, building. So he had a ballroom that became the temple room, because the ballroom had a music where the musicians would go. Well, that became the altar. So everything was like perfect. It had arches, everything. So it looked like built as a temple. And he had 4 boat wells, because he built it, the Detroit River. He dug a canal in so it would come next to his house and back out, and created an island there. And that he had 4 boat wells, and each one could park a 100-foot yacht inside of his house. I mean, they were boat wells, so they would park inside of his house. He emptied out one while he was still living and made that into a bowling alley underneath and a pool room up on top. So, and then we emptied out 2 more, and that's where we put our diorama fate museum, in those 2. Eventually, we emptied out the last one, and that became a Nathji Hall, where we had Nathji. And it was mainly, they made that temple room for weddings and things like that for the Indian congregation. Anyway, what I was going to say is he had a garage where he parked his cars. It was just a large 3-car garage. I'd say it was about half this size of this room. And, but it was all tile floor. I mean, the mosaic tile, the small tiles. And so we cleaned that up, and that's where we took prashad, and then we ate right on the floor. And I remember, I came there and somebody spilled some food and they licked it up off the floor. I mean, that was our standard back then. The Krishna's prasadam, because we're eating, sitting on the floor, and if you drop something, you lick it off the floor. And we kept everything clean. Oh my God. And that's why I said, Jayatirtha was very strict. Bhavananda came, he just wore the shoes, said, no, devotees don't have to take their shoes off in the prashad. We'll get tables and chairs, and they can sit on tables and chairs like civilized people, I mean, they changed the whole standard. And then he went to tour, and there was the kitchen. He just walked in with his shoes. Everybody looked, huh? And that became the new standard, where your shoe, They didn't care about the standards, of keeping up the standards that Prabhupada wanted. At least the ones that I personally experienced and that type of thing, they weren't. That's why I later when I wrote, they gave up their duties that Prabhupada gave them, and so more about the brahmacharya. So yeah, when I first joined, we had, everybody was assigned duties, and Prabhupada wrote a letter to Kurandar saying that in the beginning, everyone is to be engaged. You instruct, you hand out the assignments. And he said, but as the devotees advance and they express a desire to do a certain service, then he said, then your duty is to facilitate them. First, you engage them and you tell them what to do. You assign their duties. But he said, as they advance, I can't remember the exact wording, I'm just paraphrasing it. But as they advance, then and they express a desire to do a certain service, then you facilitate them. You give them the facility. I also noticed that Prabhupada was not, he was not a micromanager, and under Rameshwar he was. That's why nobody really liked to serve under him when he was a micromanager. He had to be in charge of everything, that he could be anyway, that he could do. But Prabhupada was for example, when Bhardraj was doing exhibits, he was still in India. He was going to come to America to do the museums, and Bhardraj asked, what themes, what exhibits he wanted done, and Prabhupada said, "You decide," So then Prabhupada said, "All the paintings are there. Just convert the paintings into dioramas." He said, "But if you need help, I can advise you if you need help. But other than that, that was their service. You do it. You decide." So. But, under Rameshwar, under a lot of those, they were just control freaks. They had to be totally in control of everything. Our service, at the Fate Project, Doll Project, that was our service. So one time Rameshwar said, "I want all of you to come up with a proposal on what to do for the next project." So, all of you. Mainly myself, Adi Dev, and Lochan, who were kind of the senior devotees of it. After Bhardraj fell down, he left. So we all came in with our proposal. We worked a week on. We had our own notebooks. He gave us 5 minutes each. We couldn't even describe it. And then he spoke for a half an hour of his proposal. And his proposal wasn't like anything any of us wanted to do. Anyway, I don't want to get into too much detail. That's the point. They were too much micromanaging of everything. That spoils the spirit, because like Prabhupada wrote, as the devotees mature and they have a desire to do a certain service, then they should be facilitated. Then it creates that enthusiasm to want to do that service, because that's now their service that they're doing, for Krishna. So devotees need that too. They need that. It's something they are doing and something they want to do. What else about one of the services that a number of devotees was to go and dip incense. Spiritual Sky was started Spiritual Sky Incense was started to help the income of the temples. So we would go there about 3 days a week, I think, something like that, and dip incense. That was, I had to quit. I had to stop doing that, because it was Spiritual Sky Incense in America was the chemical based. It wasn't natural oils. So you'd go, it was artificial chemicals, and I was getting headache like anything. But every time we would dip and make a package of incense, it was I think we sold them for 50 cents. It was either 50 cents or $1. Just say another 50 cents for Prabhupada, another 50 cents for Prabhupada. But the mood was everything we did was for Srila Prabhupada. More for Srila Prabhupada than for Krishna. All the time it was, we're doing this for Prabhupada. We're doing this for Prabhupada. How do you want to say? You go to Vrindavan, Krishna stole my heart in Vrindavan. But actually, Prabhupada stole our heart. Because it wasn't like I was saying before, it wasn't a Chinmayi ashram or this ashram or that one. It was the Hare Krishna movement. We never talked about it as being Prabhupada's ashram, but once we became devotees, we did everything. We were doing it for Prabhupada. And I would dress the deities. I was doing that for Prabhupada. I thought, yes, I'm dressing Gaura Nitai, and I'm Gaura Nitai as, like personal servant, but I was doing it for Prabhupada. I always considered Prabhupada's dressing the deities. I'm just assisting him. Even that type of mentality we had. Let's see. So after that, I went on to book distribution, and I was not that good at book distribution. I was kind of a coy, kind of a meek person, so I wasn't that aggressive. So it takes a little more aggressiveness to, sometimes. And we went out in deities. It was at that time, around 73, 74, that the devotees started putting on wigs and non-devotee clothes, blue jeans, and dress up like hippies to go to the concerts so they could distribute a whole lot of books. And that was Tripurari and Bopadev. There's a few other devotees that are really good at that. But I know there's two letters from Srila Prabhupada, and a lot of them will quote the second letter, because that's the one that Rameshwar would quote from, and where Prabhupada had said that, they could dress up as, if they dressed up as gentlemen, they could dress up in non-devotee clothes. But I know how that was done, and it was, how do you want to say? So anyway, originally we were all going out in the dhotis, the saris, and as devotees, and that. So I was having a hard time distributing them, but what Tripurari was doing, like I said, dressing up, but he was dressing up long-haired wigs and things like that, so he looked like a hippie and going. And the thing was that they distributed a lot of books, but they would wind up on the concert floors, people walking on them. People would just not appreciate the books. So it was quantity, but they weren't getting quality. And but that Rameshwar wanted the numbers. He just wanted, I wouldn't say he just wanted. He was sincere, but he wanted those numbers. He wanted the big numbers. And so what happened was the original letter Srila Prabhupada sent, because devotees complained they're dressing up like in long-haired wigs and all. The original letter Prabhupada wrote, he said, I don't want devotees, they should go out and distribute these books honestly. I don't remember the wording, but they should go in dhotis, shaved head, and everything. That's what he originally wanted. So Rameshwar, I was right there. He was meeting with Tripurari and all these devotees, and he said, Prabhupada just doesn't understand. They use that term quite a bit. I heard it from Rameshwar, I heard it from, actually even Bhardraj, I heard it from a number of senior devotees. They had that disease, actually. They would say, well, Prabhupada he doesn't understand. Rameshwar is arguing that they can distribute so many more books dressed up like that. And so what he did is he took, I think it was Bopadev, who was distributing, but not probably about half as many as Tripurari. And he sent him and dhoti to one of the worst places to distribute books, Watts, which is like a slum in Los Angeles. He sent him to Watts, and he's in a dhoti in Kirta, and he sent Tripurari to one of the big concerts, like a Led Zeppelin concert or something, and with a wig and all that. Of course, he distributed a whole lot more books. And then he sent the results back to Prabhupada. And so this is the difference of devotees going out in dhotis and devotees going out dressed in non-devotee clothes. It was not an honest assessment, a comparison. But based on that, then Prabhupada said, then if they dress as gentlemen, then he approved it. But I know the back history to it. So I know that Prabhupada didn't really approve that. He didn't. If he knew the whole facts, he wouldn't have approved it. If he knew they were manipulating the numbers, So anyway, and I went out, I was having a hard time, and I kept praying to help. And Krishna's help to let me distribute. I wasn't able to do that well, so I thought I just felt like I had other talents, and I just wasn't doing as much for Krishna as I could, So and then I started praying to Krishna, please give me some other service that can please Srila Prabhupada just as much, but something that I can do actually, And then the letter came from Prabhupada that he wanted artists, people with artistic talent, to come to Mayapur to help on the project. So I asked Karandra to go, and eventually he said, okay, but I had to work in the BBT warehouse for a few months to earn the ticket. And then Narayan, the art department hadn't moved. BBT art department was still in New York. It hadn't moved to Los Angeles yet. So they were going to come, but they haven't come yet. So Narayan was in charge of the artwork around the LA temple, and he heard I wanted to do artwork. So he had me paint do I have enough time? Am I going on too long?
Till 11:30.
Okay, but I need to take questions. So Prabhupada was coming. Prabhupada was there, and they were making a an asan for him for outside in his garden. And Prabhupada said that was his favorite place, the Los Angeles garden, because the devotees, they made it before I joined, but there was a parking lot on the side of the temple. And there's two parking lots, one a main parking lot, but there was a smaller parking lot on the side. And devotees dug up part of it and made that into a garden for Prabhupada to come and have his massages. Because he'd like to have a mustard oil massage in the sun, direct sun. So that, and then meeting guests and things, because they put all the flowers and made it nice. So Prabhupada said that was his favorite place on the planet. So he was there, and they didn't have the asan ready. So they painted a 4x4 foot plywood box, painted it white. And Narayan said, "You want to be an artist? Then here, paint something artistic on that." And I said, "Well, what should I paint?" He said, "You want to be the artist. You decide." So I knew I couldn't paint Krishna. I couldn't paint the holy name. I was trying to figure out, what am I going to paint? And I just thought, well, Shiva sits on a bull. Maybe I can paint a cow. I don't know. Prabhupada never said anything, but I painted a cow, and Prabhupada was sitting on top of a cow. What I was going to say. So we painted in acrylic paint, so they'd dry real fast. No medium, just directly acrylic, so it would dry quickly. So I painted the cow. I painted some flowers around it. I thought I'll paint an outdoor scene because it's an outdoors in his garden. And then on the top, I didn't know what to paint, so I thought, from before I joined the temple, I had a book with Indian motifs in it. So I thought, well, I'll put a lotus mandal, and I painted it with like blue water around it. And then Narayan came in. They had to take it down right then. He said, "The cow looks very nice." Said, "What is that on the top?" And I said, "That's a lotus flower." "That's no lotus flower." He was German. I'm not German. He was Russian. He spoke very boldly. And he said, "That's no lotus flower." And I said, "It's a lotus mandal." And he said, "Oh, it looks like impersonal art. Prabhupada doesn't like impersonal art." So he asked, "Devotee, do you have anything to cover this?" And he said, "Well, he has a Islamic prayer rug hanging on his wall at home." And he said, "Go get it." They put the rug on top, took it down to the garden. I didn't go to the garden. I had just gotten initiated, so I was a new devotee. I didn't go to the garden. But Narayan came and found me later. He said, "You got Prabhupada's mercy in the garden." He said, Prabhupada came in, he saw the cow, and he said he was smiling and looking at it and appreciating. But right before he sat down, he lifted up the blanket. And Narayan's going, "Oh no." What's he going to say? But he said, Prabhupada, seemed like okay. And he sat down. And when he sat down, he lifted up his knee, lifted up the blanket again and looked. And he said, "Who has painted this?" So Narayan said, "Oh, he's a new devotee. You just initiated Ameyatma." And he said, "Tell him he has done very nice. I like this very much." So that was the first time I got Prabhupada's mercy in the garden. I got it. But I wasn't there. I wasn't actually there. I didn't, it isn't like Prabhupada said, "Oh, you have done very nicely." But still, I got Prabhupada's mercy there. And twice I did, but I'll spare that right now. I'll still do questions. But in the early days, that was I should say about the cold showers in the morning. For us, that was austere. In Southern California, it was just kind of warm weather, but still it was austere for us. And New Vrindavan, they would come and tell us, "You people are a bunch of sissies in the city." Because in New Vrindavan, they would take cold shower in the winter. And they had outdoors, they had a barrel with the water. So that to take the shower, you just open the tap and the pressure from the barrel being up. And he said somebody would have to go up and break the ice so the water would flow. And they said you would turn purple in the morning taking a shower. Everybody would turn purple. But we were young, and it was like you do austerities. You just that type of austerity, it just helps you with your whole mood. You felt. I mean, it was austere. I kind of dreaded those cold showers, but they were. And I remember, devotee would stand by the boiler room where the hot water tank was to make sure nobody turned it on in the morning. He'd stand there chanting his japa, make sure nobody could turn on the hot water. Anyway. But it was, some things are austere. We all slept, like I said, about 40 of us or so per room in those two big rooms. And we all just slept on the floor. And I tried, because I felt that Rameshwar and Tripurari are the more advanced devotees, so I made sure I slept near them. I don't know if they, whatever. I wanted to get more of their association. And Tripurari was the number one book distributor. He distributed the most books, when Prabhupada was here. And so he was saying when he first came, he asked devotees, what service does Srila Prabhupada appreciate the most? And I said, book distribution. So then that became his life. That's what he wanted to do. And both Rameshwar and Tripurari would stand right next to Prabhupada's Vyasasan. I mean, this is not Prabhupada was there for japa period. We didn't have murtis, we had a painting. And they would just stand there and enthusiastically chant their rounds in the morning, And so yeah, I saw that. I mean, I saw that that enthusiasm that they put into their chanting, that devotees were very enthusiastic when we joined, And it was like I said, everything was for Prabhupada. Everything we did was for Srila Prabhupada. We didn't even think that we're doing it so much that we're doing it for Krishna. I mean, that was there. We would say things like, but it was for Prabhupada. The museum project we did was for Srila Prabhupada. For the museum project, we also knew it was for Srila Bhaktisiddhanta because he's the one who started the Faith project. So, but everything was done for Prabhupada. Painting, you do the paintings, the art for the books. Well, that's for Prabhupada's books. It's all for Prabhupada. Because later I started to paint for the books. After Narayan saw the cow and I painted that, he said, you're not going to India. You need to paint for the Prabhupada's books for the BBT. So and the BBT artists came. So Jadharani, Murlidhar, Parikshit, they all eventually came, and we all had studios in the underneath Prabhupada's rooms, which are now part of the pujari rooms, but that was our studios back there. And but I never actually painted for the books, because after I painted 3 paintings of Prabhupada, Bhardraj came with the Fate project, and one of the artists told me, if you really want to serve Srila Prabhupada doing art, you should join Bhardraj, because he was the number one artist, and Prabhupada had him go just to learn to make these diorama exhibits. And so if you really want to please him with art, you should do with that project. So I joined with him. But all right, I guess I can open it up for questions. Is there a microphone?
Thank you for the wonderful association. When we contemplate on what we have got from Srila Prabhupada, and the kind of gratitude sets in, kind of indebtedness towards the spiritual master, that's what generally, pushes you to do something So was it the same for you? Because as you mentioned in the lecture, in the association, that everything you did was for Srila Prabhupada. So how a devotee cultures that mood and the intensity, and how to prolong that intensity, because when we start doing it, as you mentioned in the early days, everyone was very enthusiastic. But as the time goes on, how to maintain that high level of enthusiasm and that level of indebtedness and that level of gratitude and the level of intensity towards the spiritual.
There wasn't. I'm trying to think. When we joined, it wasn't like anybody told us. You know, it was like there was no instruction. Like you have to do things. You have to dedicate everything you're doing to Prabhupada or anything. It just came naturally. You know, it just came. We all felt like that. Actually, once we joined, once we were a devotee, we just wanted to do it, what we were doing for Prabhupada. So it just came out. I don't remember any process to it or anything, you know. But you by association. I mean, the senior devotees had that because they had the direct with Prabhupada. So it just came by association. And I was going to say something. I can't remember what now. No, I'll think of it later. But again, what is it?
He's asking how to retain that.
Retain it. I don't know. That's just natural, I think. I mean, that's if you. That's why I say we love Srila Prabhupada. I don't know how to explain that, but you know, he stole our heart. So, I mean, even devotees that went away, they're still, when they come back, they never left. You know, most of them, a few, just very few actually left where they didn't want anything to do with Prabhupada or Krishna that I know of. I mean, just all of them, even the ones that, you know, I mean, they fell down, they had a problem, but they didn't leave Prabhupada. There was a few who became envious, but very few. So it's just that if it's there, if you develop that relationship with the spiritual master and you develop it, as long as you're not creating any offenses, as long as there's no major offenses, it should remain, you know. Of course, we're all creating offenses. Well, I am creating offenses. I can't say for anybody else. I know I create offenses, but not intentionally. And I'm always, you know, there's always some things we know we should do different or better, but as long as we're not creating, you know, knowingly creating offenses. That's one thing I have seen. When devotees knowingly were disobeying Prabhupada in some way, that's when they really had struggles. And okay. Any other questions?
So it was 2 dormitories and 60 devotees staying in LA temple. And just 2-3 bathrooms. It must be excellent task in the morning. Attending Mandir for everybody. Yeah,
if you had, like, when once I started addressing the deities, and I had to get, you know, because I wanted to. A lot of times devotees that come start laying out the clothes during Mangal Aarti or something. I wanted to get everything laid out and ready before the Mangal Aartis, and I wanted to get my rounds chanted before Mangal Aarti. So that way, because I would miss the japa period of time. So yeah, I would make sure I get up very early. And so devotees had services like they would, it actually worked out. It was very few times we actually waited in line because we all kind of scheduled ourselves, you know, because by our service that what we were doing, you know. So it seemed to work. I don't remember waiting. I mean, a few times waiting a few minutes or something, but not like a line of anyone. We just had everyone didn't wake up. I guess a lot of people woke up at the same time, but I just don't remember ever like a waiting line. There was no alarm. Well, maybe there was, but I don't remember. I didn't have an alarm. I don't know how I got up early. Just anyway.
Hare Shalom, can you share that past time of you decorating Nithaya Gauranga as doing Alankara of Nithaya Gauranga as Krishna, because the head pujari there was not decorating as the Supreme Lord. The Nithaya Gauranga is devotees. They are devotees. So then Prabhupada approved your...
Oh, the dressing. You want me to speak about that? Okay, well, that was the second time I got Prabhupada's mercy in his garden. What I wasn't there. Once I started, when I got Brahmin initiation, they needed pujaris for Rukmini-Dwarakadish in Los Angeles. It's Rukmini-Dwarakadish, Prabhupada, rather than Radha Krishna. And he named the Los Angeles temple New Dwarka. So they needed more pujaris for them, and I didn't feel that I was qualified yet to dress Rukmini or Radharani. You know, I was in a male body, so I wanted to just. Actually, since the time I got the teachings of Lord Chaitanya book in 1970 at the library, I just had an affection for Lord Chaitanya, so I wanted to dress them, Gaur Nitai. So I asked, and he said, mostly for Gaur Nitai it was all Madhajis. In fact, I don't think there was one male pujari at that time, and it was all Madhajis. And he said there is a waiting list, and he said you wouldn't be able to dress for months. So anyway, but then so a few days later, the head pujari contacted me and said the devotee who puts them in their night clothes, he's just leaving, and he's putting on their night clothes 7 days a week. He said, if you could take that service, and I'll make sure you're trained up as a backup pujari to dress them. So I agreed. So then I was putting them in their night clothes every night. And then as soon as I got trained up to dress Gaur Nitai, it was like so many of the Madhajis weren't showing up, and I was dressing. Within a few weeks, I was dressing them about 3 or 4 times a week. And then I became their main pujari really quickly. And so they were dressed, Gaur Nitai was dressed very simply. At that time, Rukmini-Dwarakadish, they're pinned up the chadars, their dresses, everything, and more jewelry and all. But Gaur Nitai was dressed very simple. Chadars hung down straight, garland, maybe one necklace, very simple. And so I started dressing them, and I thought, I started hanging the threads so I can pin up everything, and I started dressing them more and more opulently. And there was one day that I remember, because whenever they greeted the deities in the morning, the men would be standing by Gaur Nitai's altar first, but when the doors opened, they would always greet, Sri Sri Rukmini-Dwarakadish ki jai, But the one day that I dressed them and I tried to make them as nice as I could, when the doors opened in Rameshwar, Sri Sri Gaur Nitai ki jai. And all the devotees noticed, they were dressed differently. And I took that, it gave me a nice warm feeling that I was, that the devotees recognized it, and I thought, well, then Lord Chaitanya must be pleased, And, but the head pujari, not the head, but the Rukmini-Dwarakadish's pujaris also noticed, and they were not happy. and they told me, you are taking away the glories of Rukmini-Dwarakadish, and Gaur Nitai should not be dressed so opulently. Lord Chaitanya came as a devotee, and he didn't like when somebody addressed him as Krishna, and he just came in the mood of a devotee. And then he took sannyas, so he should be dressed very simple and plain, you know. And I disagreed. I said, no, he is Radha and Krishna combined, you know, and we know that. So we should dress him very opulently. And they were like, the thing was that, and the head pujari came, he stayed out of it because he liked the way I was dressing them, but he didn't know who was right, you know, so he just stayed out of it. So the other pujaris, even though some of them were dressing like for 2 years before I did, they were upset that I wasn't listening to them. That I was a new devotee, newly, you know, Brahmin initiated, and I'm not taking their advice and guidance. But I just thought, well, they're not my authority, and I felt this. I just felt they should be dressed that way. So I continued to do it, and the festival came up. They were coming in to make turbans for Jagannath and Dwarakadish. And I said, well, what about Gaurnitai? They need turbans. We never made turbans for Gaurnitai, you know, and should they wear a turban? I said, why not? Krishna wearing a turban, why not Lord Chaitanya? So they made them. But anyway, so there was a conflict with the other pujaris. So when Prabhupada came, he would go to the different departments, he would go to the BBT, and so he went to the Fate studio, the Doll Project studio one day, so we got Prabhupada's Darshan there. And then I was walking by, a few days later, I was walking by, in the temple, outside, and devotee said, why aren't you in Prabhupada's garden? He's meeting with the pujaris. I didn't hear about that. Nobody told me there was a meeting. And I was wondering, because I was friends with Navadvip, who was the head pujari. So why didn't they tell me? I'm Lord Chaitanya's pujari. So I go over to the garden. Sudama, it was a Maharaj, Sudama Maharaj, he had a brother who was a devotee. And he was standing by the garden. And I came there, and he said, you can't go in there. And I said, yes, I can. I'm a pujari. I'm Lord Chaitanya's pujari, and Prabhupada's meeting with pujari. No, you can't go in. And I tried to walk past him, and he actually physically stopped me. You know, and we're right by the wall, so it's an open, you know, wall. I mean, I was saying out loud. I don't know if they could hear me inside. You know, Prabhupada was right there, and the other devotees. But I was saying, I'm Lord Chaitanya's pujari. I need to go into the meeting. And when he then he said, no, I'm under order not to allow you in. And then he physically stopped me. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get into a fight out here, you know. So I walked away, but I was like, why wasn't I invited? Anyway, after the meeting, the Navadvip, the head pujari, came and told me, he said, the reason why, he said, I wanted you to come, but the other Rukmini-Dwarakadish pujaris were very upset the way I was dressing them. They thought I was wrong, philosophically wrong, that Lord Chaitanya should not be dressed that way. And so they wanted to complain. Well, why couldn't they complain with me there? I don't know why. They didn't want me there, but they told Prabhupada I had dressed them that day. And they said, you know, just to show him how I was dressing them, they were saying, he dressed them that day, and you know, that's the way he was dressing. And I was, oh, he dressed them nicely. It was Navadvip was telling me. And then he said, you know, that I was doing right. He said, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda should be dressed like two princes, but, you know, not the female princess, but multiple, plural prince, you know. So they'd be dressed like two princes. And, I mean, a prince is dressed like a king. I mean, he's dressed nicely, you know. So Prabhupada approved of it. So that's how I got Prabhupada's mercy in the garden 2 times without being in the garden again. That's kind of the story of my life. I got his mercy, but it wasn't right there, you know. Anyway, any other? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Understood. So, this Guru Sri Prabhu, this
Speak louder. Come.
Hare Krishna. So like this Guru issue regarding things. Like many of the senior devotees who Prabhupada appointed as a GBC members, and later all of them became Gurus, said Gurus. Now the question arises here, like because these people, Prabhupada set up a new organization. Prabhupada set up a new organization, ISKCON. Yes, all of them are totally new. Yes, most of them already foreigners, not Indian people. All are foreigners only. They have some passion. All of like foreign blood, they have some passion to do something like vigorously and kind of things. The controlling mood is there always. So like what I generally think actually, what I generally expect or think like because foreign people generally have tendency to control all the things and do the things in their own way kind of. So because Prabhupada has set up this organization of the foreign people, and also this is prone to happen that these people will not listen Prabhupada.
And the last part I didn't quite understand. That
Actually, he is telling that the Westerners generally they have a tendency to control.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
So the fall down of these gurus, it happened. It is bound to happen because of that tendency. Correct. Okay. So what is the question then?
So question is that why Prabhupada selected? Yes.
Without the
Tell me
mic.
why Prabhupada
He can speak
empowered
without the
why
mic.
Prabhupada-
I think the mic is giving too much bass, and I need higher frequency.
So like all the Western devotees, no?
Speak loudly, yes.
Western devotees, like people.
I know the control part. I heard that part. I just the last part. I didn't.
Last question.
Yeah, the question.
So that this thing is prone. Is very natural kind of. They became as a guru already. They were showing the symptoms when Prabhupada was there. That time Kirtan Maharaj was there. Hansdutta Maharaj was there. That time they like claimed themselves guru, acting like guru. So Prabhupada knew very well these people kind of in future they will going to become all this like this. So
What is the
So
question?
why?
the question is that Prabhupada knew very well this thing.
Yeah.
Matlab this going to happen. Or now again this movement is started through ISKCON Bangalore. We got separated kind of things. So this is my question to how you look after this. Prabhupada again started this movement from India. This is
So
Not able to understand. Even I have not understood the question. What day you started ISKCON right now?
So how to not to make sure that doesn't happen again, or what?
No.
I don't-
So I am just asking. I'm just asking this question: how to relate with this situation, kind of.
But anyway, the thing that I'll just say a few things about the.
Comparatively with Indians and foreign Westerners, kind of taking the things as a sincerely, as a dedicated disciple of Srila Prabhupada, Indians are following more better. Now, what we are thinking.
It's a give and take. I mean, I've seen both. I've seen Indians who want to be controlled too. It's just people are people. But as far as what was I going to say? As far as like Prabhupada having a more aggressive people in GBC position, why they were, because they got things done. They were able to manage. But not all of them. Actually, Kurandar was actually quite humble, but Kurandar was a GBC. When he was GBC, when he was doing well, he was like the number one, everybody went to Kurandar because I was in his office many times. Kirtananda would call him. Anyway, different devotees would call him, and temple presidents, all that. But he would always, outside of his zone. Everybody went to Kurandar. If they didn't go to Prabhupada, they went to Kurandar to resolve issues, to figure out things. We were told if Prabhupada leaves, Kurandar is going to take over. He'll be the next guru, actually, and he'll take over ISKCON because he was basically helping all the other GBCs manage. Most of them, maybe not all of them, but most of them. He was also very humble. He wasn't like so aggressive. That Tamal was very personally aggressive. Rameshwar, he had some humility to him at times, but once they became guru, that kind of went away. It got to their head, you know. So that's kind of all an individual thing. I mean, Gopal Krishna, I felt was also somewhat aggressive, you know, and the way he was managing and controlling, you know. When he wasn't one of the first acharyas, but when I've had to do service with him in Delhi, and you know, I saw he was somewhat controlling. So I mean, it's not by just by race or by
Out of 10,000 disciples, as Prabhupada himself said, very few, handful of them will actually become aggressive and become gurus and such. Not that every white devotee is correct that. As rightly mentioned, very few handful of devotees actually became that.
And it's kind of natural that the ones who are more aggressive work their way up to a manager. They want to, but at the beginning, Prabhupada just, they weren't like aggressive so much. What I mean is there were no positions. Prabhupada created and put the people into the positions. So the first 12 GBC, Prabhupada selected them mostly because they were just able to get things done. They were managing, temple or something. Yeah.
So what happened? Why Karandra Prabhu? What went wrong with him? What went wrong?
Actually, okay. So after he left the first time and he came back, and then Prabhupada, I'll get to why he left originally, but he came back and Prabhupada immediately made him GBC in India. But he told me that he had to step down from that because he felt that he had just fallen, and when he came back, everybody was offering him obeisances and like praising him, and he felt like he didn't deserve that, that he was still felt fallen, and so he stepped down from that. And then he came to Los Angeles, back to LA, and he told Rameshwar, just give him a menial service. He wants to be engaged in service, but he doesn't want a position. He doesn't want people thinking he's a great devotee, So that's why I say he was humble at times, but that stepping down, and when Prabhupada gave him the position, because he was a good manager, he shouldn't have left that position. But when he came back, and Rameshwar then put him in charge of the Fate project as far as a financial director, kind of over Bhardraj, who was an artist. But Rameshwar felt that he needed a financial director over. So he and I shared an office together, Karandra and I. And at that time, Karandra he was anguished over what happened. Why did he fall down? Why did he leave? He was trying to figure it out. But I saw, and there's recordings of him going out in the morning walk. And you know how you play the devil advocate. You ask Prabhupada, well, the scientists say this, or the impersonalists say this, or whatever, and Prabhupada would give an answer. But he was giving arguments of an existential arguments about that there's no meaning to life. It's just all random, and there's no purpose, and there's no meaning. Nothing has any meaning. The person who fathered that philosophy wound up driving off a cliff and killing himself, because that's where that philosophy ends. But he was giving Prabhupada arguments on that, kind of playing the devil advocate. But when you listen to those tapes, it really sounds like that's where he had his doubts, and his mind was at that point. So after he left again, after the Fate he left then, he became a Buddhist. Impersonalist. So, and I saw him once after he was a Buddhist, and he came at the LA temple. He just came and I came up to him and, offered my respect because I hadn't seen him for a long time. And he said, Prabhu, you don't want to talk to me. I'm now a Buddhist. I'm an atheist. I'm a Buddhist. So, but what is it? Oh, so why he fell. That's what I think, because, and then actually one day, Prabhupada's giving class, and this was just probably a week or two before Prabhupada, because as soon as Prabhupada left LA at that point, Karanda resigned. So Prabhupada's giving class, and Karanda was sitting with his back leaned up against the Vyasa-san, and he kept falling asleep with his back to Prabhupada. And that class was Punar Mustika Bhav, again become a mouse. And while he was giving that class, and I saw Karanda with his back to Prabhupada falling asleep, I thought Prabhupada is talking about giving the class about Karanda. That was what I felt like in my, I thought, how can he have his back right up to Prabhupada and just fall asleep? Punar Mustika Bhav, again become a mouse.
Somewhere, I don't know, maybe some Mataji, some Govinda, some Matajis, I was reading the recollection of Karandara's leaving.
What?
Karandar Prabhu's leaving the movement. Those memories, recollection, because he was a very powerful leader. So she wrote that Vishnu Jana Maharaj, he was a very charismatic figure of the movement. And when Vishnu Jana Maharaj, while traveling with his Sankirtan party, when he came, might be Ali temple, whatever temple where Karandar Prabhu was the in charge. So somehow Karandar Prabhu was had a lot of enviousness to Vishnu Jana Swami's some issues. So there she is writing that the offense which happened to Vishnu Jana Swami, because he was not allowing. He was senior, Vishnu Jana Swami is senior to him also, Karandara Prabhu. Something. So she was relating to the offense.
Do you know who wrote that? I'm just curious.
I'm forgetting. Somewhere I was searching out because today.
Because I don't recollect anything like that, but I wasn't in management or anything at that time, but I just don't recollect anything like that. I know that when Tamal Krishna and who was doing, wait a minute, was Tamal Krishna and Vishnujan doing the party together? When they came through LA, they were taking brahmacharis away. And not just LA, every temple they went to. And Prabhupada chastised them for that. So there was a conflict for that reason. Because when they would come, not just take brahmacharis, they would take kartals, anything they could grab their hands on, and liberate it from the devotees who were in Maya. They considered us living in the city in Maya, and they were doing traveling and preaching, and they had a very when they took. They were taking the devotees away so they could have more devotees on their party. And Prabhupada wrote them and said, you can make new devotees, make them from the preaching, not take existing devotees from a temple. So I remember that, but I don't remember the other. I do know one thing, that when devotees were having a conflict, and certainly there was some kind of disagreement with some devotees, Karandar did reestablish that everyone should offer obeisances, and respect one another. And, he pushed for that, for the mutual respect. And if there's a disagreement, you offer obeisances, you apologize, and then you try to work out the disagreement. So I do remember that from him.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, for devotees here in India, attachment to their family members, especially mother and father, is relatively high compared to the devotees in the West. So, in case of, in your case, how did Prabhupada help you to overcome those attachment, and how did they live their bodies?
Well, Lord Chaitanya wasn't I don't know if you would call it attached to his mother, but he wanted to make sure she was taken care of. And that's a duty also of a son, to make sure that the mother and all is taken care of. So I don't. Prabhupada didn't meet with my mother. I wasn't. My mother thought it was a cult at first. My parents. Well, my father was a very quiet person, but my mother thought it was a cult, because at that time there was the Charles Manson cult and all this. He murdered people and all these things. So they were worried about anything like a cult. So later she became favorable. But what was I going to say? But because she was attached, and she would come every other Sunday to the temple. And when Prabhupada was there, she came a couple of times for classes. So because she was attached to me, she kept coming to the temple. Then she realized it was a bona fide movement, and it was helping. She was very favorable after that. But I do know, like with Brahmananda and Gargamuni. Prabhupada nicknamed me that. I thought it was just devotees did it. Gargamuni said it was Prabhupada. Anyway, so their mother came, and she had, both sons had joined up, and she had criticized that they're bowing down to a person by bowing down to Prabhupada. And she had criticized it, why my sons, should bow down to another person, And so when she came, Prabhupada instructed them, now you bow down to your mother. But Prabhupada he wanted us to have a good relationship with our parents. He wasn't like, unless they wouldn't let us be devotees. If they're going to drag us away from the temple or something, and because there was this deprogramming thing going on. So then that's another thing. Then you have to break off any relationship. And that also happens here in India, not deprogrammers, but where the parents they don't want their sons becoming, brahmachari or temple thing. But as far as, having a good relationship, that should be, that as long as they're trying to get them to be favorable, that should be okay. I mean, that's good. I probably was an exception, because not exception, there were other devotees that their parents were favorable and came. Like I said, at first mine weren't, but then my mother wound up making a kurta for Srila Prabhupada, a silk kurta and a japa bag, but she didn't get to go into the room. So they wound up favorable. I can't remember. I don't know if that answered any question or not.
Prabhu, that in the association you told about the Devavati Mataji.
No, okay.
So can you let this past night to the very Salvat devotees?
Okay. Okay. So when I started painting, when Narayan told me I should just paint for the books and that the BBT artists were coming, there was one artist who was already there, a BBT artist in Los Angeles, Devahuti. Devahuti was elderly. She was almost Prabhupada's age. She had all silver hair and all, and she was grandma. So she was. When I got the Krishna book in the library, when I found the Krishna book, and those paintings were windows in the spiritual sky, I thought, whoever painted these paintings, they're elevated souls. I thought, because I'd never seen Indian prints before, so I didn't know they were based on I thought that was their realizations they were painting these paintings from, so I thought they had seeing into the spiritual world and were painting these paintings. So I wanted to meet these artists. And there was a certain number of paintings that I really liked. And the rasa dance in the Krishna book printing, the color separations aren't that good. But when you see the painting in real life, it's like, wow. And it's hanging in Prabhupada's room in Los Angeles in his bedroom. But so that painting, the rasa dance, I like. Krishna stealing the clothes of the gopis, the flower garland at Mathura, the flower walla giving the garland. Anyway, so there's a number of the paintings that I really stood out that I liked. And so when I started to paint, Narayan told me I should take some, because I had done oil paints, but I was never a professional artist. And so he said I should take some training from Devahuti. So I paint the paintings properly for the books. So I did, and all she did was talk about Srila Prabhupada. She was just, that's all she would talk about, basically. And I really appreciated her association. She was grandma. As brahmacharis, we were very strict. Prabhupada, no speaking brahmacharis and brahmacharinis. And I was going to mention brahmacharinis because you don't have here, right? Yeah. So Prabhupada didn't want originally. He just wanted men coming, but then the women wanted to be devotees, and he saw the girls are basically living on the street, he called it. They were just shacking up with whoever they could stay. So, and they weren't staying with their parents anymore, and they were just, Prabhupada said, on the street. So, and they wanted to be devotees. So he eventually set up a brahmacharini ashram. And the very first letters about that went to Jadharani and Satsvarup. They got married. Jadharani and Satsvarup were married. Prabhupada got them married. And so there's a letter, I can't remember if it was addressed to Satsvarup or Jadharani, but he was instructing Jadharani to set up brahmacharini ashram. And he even said brahmacharini ashram is artificial. There's no real such thing as a brahmacharini ashram. They should, and so he told that train them up and then quickly they should get married. So that was Prabhupada's program with the brahmacharinis, the young girls coming, unwed girls. So train them up quickly and then they should be married immediately. Another thing that Prabhupada said one time, I'll get to the Devahuti, but another thing that he had said one time was, he said, so all of you are brahmacharis. All of you who are brahmacharis, he said, then you should remain brahmachari. Do not get married. You should remain brahmachari. And all of the girls who are not married, you should marry immediately. And then he chuckled. Says, who are they going to marry? I'm going to have to marry one of the brahmacharis. But anyway, so that was Prabhupada's program. Actually, it's kind of connected to Devahuti too, because I could go on about that. But Prabhupada instructed her to create a Mataji's ashram. And but so Devahuti, so I started learning and training from her, and the first thing I asked is, well, what paintings have you painted? And the paintings she told me were the Rasa dance, all the ones my favorite paintings, and so Krishna satisfied that prayer that I wanted to meet the people who painted those paintings, and Prabhupada really liked her paintings. Her paintings, a number of them hang in Prabhupada's quarters and in Los Angeles. And so she told me when I painted 3 paintings of Srila Prabhupada, and then then she said, now you can paint your first painting for the books. So she said, for your first painting, you select the painting. And I said, well, in Prabhupada's room, on his altar, there's a Radha and Krishna entwined as one. And so, and I said, I don't see any paintings of that. And she said, oh, no, not that painting. And she said, she had asked Srila Prabhupada, Jadharani had asked, other artists had asked to paint that painting. And she said, Prabhupada had told that is such an intimate pastime, an intimate form of Radha Krishna combining. He said that unless you're a pure devotee, you could make offenses and fall down. So he said, only once you're a pure devotee, you could paint that painting. So she said, no, Prabhu, not that one. You have to select something else. So I selected some other. And then, which I never painted because by the time I did sketches sent to Prabhupada, but by the time I got his answer back, I had started joining with Bhardaraj with the Fate Project. But Devahuti told me that she asked Srila Prabhupada, what is your favorite style of art. What is your favorite style of painting? And he said Rajasthani style, and like the Brijbasi style in the temples in Vrindavan. And so she told me, I'm trying to paint that style, but she said, I am a woman, I'm very feminine, and it's always comes out feminine, and but she said, I'm trying to paint that style just to please Prabhupada. Again, everything we did, all the devotees, just to please Prabhupada. That was our main number one. So, but then Rameshwar, Prabhupada had translated the whole the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was done with it for some time, a year or something, some time. And the BBT hadn't gotten around to getting it published. So Prabhupada came and told Rameshwar 2 months. He gave him 2 months to publish the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita, which turned into 17 hardbound volume of books. And at that time, we could not find, there was no publisher in the world that could publish 17 volumes of that, size in just 2 months. So it was a task, and Rameshwar sent out letters, messages all over ISKCON. Anybody who has any artistic talent, come to LA, because they needed all kinds of paintings for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Devahuti was there in Los Angeles, and Rameshwar didn't give her any assignment, because Rameshwar had decided he wanted all the BBT paintings to be of just one style, and he wanted the Renaissance style, like the realistic type Renaissance style. And Devahuti refused, because Prabhupada told her his favorite style was Rajasthani, and she was painting for Prabhupada. And she even told Rameshwar, I'm painting for Srila Prabhupada. I'm not painting for you, Rameshwar. I'm painting for Prabhupada. But he wanted that one style. So he refused to give her, even though he was asking for anybody come that's got artistic talent, we'll pay your fare and you can paint for the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he wouldn't give her one painting. So she came to me crying about that and explained that to me. She came crying. And, elderly Mataji crying. And I was like, so I told her, then you have to write Srila Prabhupada a letter. Prabhupada told us not to write letters. He was getting too many letters. He said, if we could, to stop writing him letters. She's the one who told me I had to write the letter to Prabhupada when I was doing the sketches for the paintings. For the books. She said, no, Prabhupada has to approve of the paintings for his books. They're illustrating Prabhupada's books. They're illustrating a philosophy. They have to be done properly. So she had me write the letter. So then I told her, you have to write this letter to Prabhupada. She said, oh, no, I don't want to bother Prabhupada with I said, you have to. And I said, if you don't write the letter, I'm going to write him. So then she agreed. So, okay, I'll write the letter. So she came back crying about 2 weeks later. And this time, though, it was tears of joy, because she had the letter from Prabhupada. And she told me to read the first part of it. It was addressed to her and Rameshwar, and it was instructing Rameshwar, you have to allow Devahuti to paint the one painting he wanted her to paint for the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I don't remember the verse, but it was for Radha and Krishna and combined into one. Lord Chaitanya is Radha and Krishna combined. So he said, I want Krishna on one side and Lord Chaitanya on the other side. And in the middle, Radha and Krishna entwined as one. That painting that I wanted to do that, she said. And then I read that and she said, Prabhu, do you know what that means? And I said, yes, Prabhupada has recognized you as a pure devotee, because he told her, until you're a pure devotee, you can't paint that painting. So I said, yes, that's why she was crying. This time it was tears of ecstasy, So she painted that painting. It's there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Rameshwar was so upset because she had gone over his head and gone directly to Prabhupada. And he told her, you will never paint for the BBT again. And the BBT was paying an apartment for her. So she had her own apartment, and out of that apartment, she had her studio, and she was training other Matajis to paint. but he said BBT's not paying for your apartment anymore because you're not painting any more paintings for the BBT. You have to live in the Brahmacharya ashram. And she, actually, the third time she came crying because she said, I cannot live in the Brahmacharya ashram. She said, I'm older. I need my peace and quiet. My art is my service. And even though I can't paint for the books, she said that's still her service. She still needs to paint. She needs her peace and quiet. Brahmacharya ashram was too hectic. And so she left. She left ISKCON. Instead of, taking care of the senior, elderly Mataji, and Prabhupada loved her paintings. She had to leave, but she had a daughter who was a devotee, so she said, I'm going to go live with her. But still, I never did find out what happened with her. I've asked so many devotees, what happened to her daughter. I don't know if she still stayed at temples. I always wanted to do a website, Prabhu, maybe you can help me with it, because I want to do a website in her honor to glorify her, because very few devotees Prabhupada recognized as being pure. The Jayananda is the only one that I know of. And nobody knows of that. She just,
how many years she was in the movement? For how many years?
I'd have to look at when she was initiated. I don't know if it was 68 or 69. It was probably around 75 she left. 74 or 5.
Almost what age?
Huh?
How much aged she was?
Yeah, but like I said, she was elderly. I don't know her exact age, but she's in a couple videos. I haven't seen photos, but she's in a couple videos of Prabhupada in Los Angeles. But another thing okay, I was brahmachari. And the last thing when she came and told me she was leaving, because she said, I can't stay here anymore. And she's leaving. The next day she was leaving. She came with a couple letters that I don't see in the BBT, because, devotees sent their letters into the BBT after Prabhupada left. And she showed me a couple of letters that Prabhupada wrote her that I don't see in the archives, in the Veda base. And they were Prabhupada instructing her to create an all-women's ashram. And she said, Prabhupada gave her these instructions, but she said, I'm a woman. How am I going to create an ashram? I don't know how to get the money and, facility for it. And she said, I'm just a simple woman. And she said, what am I supposed to do? Go and ask Rameshwar for money to start an ashram? And so she said, Prabhu, you're going to have to do this. And I'm a brahmachari. How am I going to create an all-women's ashram? I even told her, Mataji, you may be a woman, but I'm a brahmachari. I'm a man. I'm a brahmachari. I can't do that. And she said, you have to, because I can't do it. And she said, Prabhupada gave me the instruction. I'm giving you the instructions. But part of those instructions are very, what we would say controversial maybe, but Prabhupada said that it was for the women whose husbands, have taken sannyas, for the older Matajis who are living alone or something who come. But he said also for the girls whose husbands leave them and they have children, he said they should come. The boys should stay with the mothers until they're 5, then they go to Gurukula. The girls should just remain with the mother. And they shouldn't go to school. And the women in that ashram should train the girls how to sew, how to cook, how to clean, and how to serve their husbands. And then he said, and by no later than 13 or 14, they should be married. And that Prabhupada gave for that ashram. So, and she was saying, and Devahudi was even saying that she had she said, when my granddaughter gets to be 13 or 14, you should marry her, but she left anyway. All right, I'm going too much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.